Welcome back. It's a good night for a story. We'll keep you company. Thanks for listening and or watching. Now, tonight's tale. In humanity's first ever interstellar civil war, nearly all society is dependent upon artificials like Inspector Lazareth, a 3.5-foot tall robot. A cross between Sherlock Holmes and R2-D2, he investigates homicides in Underborn, farthest colony from Earth. When an upstanding Marine is killed during a concert where his celebrity sister is performing, Lazareth must go aboard a military battle liner to lay bare the killer in an intricate love triangle. Lazareth and a Case of Love and Trauma. Chapter 1. Spotlights streaked over a battle liner of pallid thermal tiles and gray blast glass. The UMDD specs, maybe 6 months old and no slimmer than a city block, this starcraft was docked and pregnant. Galley to stern guns, forward to bow rockets. Aboard you could no doubt find every last eligible male between the age of 13 and 55. They'd all be shipping out by sunup, and judging by the decibels, everyone knew this was their final friendly port of call. Parties and concerts for deploying troopers were like boomtowns over a mother lode. Pursers and petty officers could score more lather in a single night than their next 2 promotions combined. Lather was wartime slango for money, bank, coin. War Department was only too happy to look the other way for a night or two. Made for a cheerier passage to the front lines. Besides, there was still 2 weeks for everyone to dry out before game time. As such, Lieutenant Vance Davenport found himself exiting a taxi amidst the most lax security he'd ever seen. Perhaps a smattering of roadside checkpoints manned by unarmed artificial MPs with harmony settings less offensive than a butterfly. You could probably get an interstellar warhead into this muddy shipyard by simply painting the word beer across it. The lieutenant tipped his officer's cap and auto driver, then waded into the inebriated racket. Even though the show was ending in 5 minutes, he wasn't late. Davenport hadn't come for the music, though he surely knew the song blaring from every speaker hub. He'd recognize it anywhere, been hearing this same tune and the voice singing it since he was a teenager. Mandy was her stage name, and her coveted brand of celebrity was every inch the siren of myth and mirth. It was more than stardom. She spoke without speaking, moved without moving. Strange, actually. So much so that an escort of officers had to get her off the flight deck while the band was still playing, her sparkly costume forcing a sergeant to pry her away from them. "Hey there, soldier," said Mandy, looking up from under a rhinestone cowboy hat. "You shipping out too?" "We all are in 10 hours, replied Sergeant Phil Rose. "And would your sweetheart be mad if I asked you for that jacket?" Phil Rose removed a bomber jacket he'd squandered his entire BHA to buy and bundled the young woman's bare arms without a second thought. "You're never going to get this back," she warned. He nodded and delivered the singer safely to a locked cabin. "Good luck," said the sergeant, unlocking the door with a keyring from his belt loop. She entered, looking back to say something, but he'd already gone, the door handle clicking securely. The lights were on, but the dimmer low. In fact, it was so dark, she half expected hiding friends to jump out and yell, "Surprise!" Only it wasn't her birthday for 9 more months. Where was everyone? Her manager? Agent? Had everyone gone out drinking with the troopers? Sergeant? Mandy called out, just shy of a shout. Nothing. Her fingertips groped in empty space, hoping to hit upon a wall panel or a switch or something. She only located an unused mop still in plastic wrap. Mandy began feeling uneasy. She decided she'd better go out and see who she could find. Her breathing was starting to sound like panting, so she forced herself to stop in place until she steadied. Boy, would she tear into her team for this stunt. They knew she hated being left alone, almost as much as she hated the dark. She'd been this way since she was a teen, before she was Mandy, back when she was just the daughter of General Darrell and Audrey Davenport. A pair of hands gripped her forearms so forcibly that she felt they might rip off inside the bomber jacket's sleeves. They felt like vice grips. Her memory flashed back to wrestling her brother in high school. He was team captain, and she wasn't. "Evening, Amanda," said Lieutenant Davenport, flicking the light dial up to full. Mandy batted multicolored eyelashes. "Scared me half to death." Her brother's recruiting poster jawline was popping from the collar of a perfectly pressed uniform. "Didn't take you long to get Phil's jacket. We went through basic together, fixed him up with his wife," he explained. "Was stunned to learn you'd be performing here tonight. Military can't afford your contract rider." "It's free. Proud to support the effort," she said uncaringly, fixing frizzy blonde highlights in a panel mirror over a small sink and basin. "How've you been?" "Been with Ma." She squeezed her eyelids shut, hands dropping at her hips. He needn't say any more, and he didn't. Their mother was gone. General Darrell Davenport had died in January, and he was Audrey Davenport's whole world. Surprising she'd held on to see February. "When?" Mandy finally asked, still refusing her eyes any light. "Last week. But I didn't come to tell you that, Amanda. I came for you to tell me something." She looked up at her brother again, and a bemused giggle escaped from her. Not that there was anything the least bit funny going on here. She quickly concluded that her reaction must be shock. Shock because there was a nickel-plated officer's repeater trained at her forehead. She only now noticed that Vance was wearing trim white ceremony gloves. He was as decorated an officer as their father, and easily as honest and responsible. This meant that what she was now witnessing was the most intentional and drop-dead serious act of her brother's entire life. "That's going to make an awful bang, big bro. No one's going to hear a thing after that show you just put on, little sis." "That's what this is about? You're jealous I pursued my dreams, and you always did whatever Dad told you." He cocked the pistol's hammer, and she gasped into lip-biting silence. No more lies. She knew exactly what he meant, and he knew she knew. A few Christmases back, she felt he was on the verge of broaching this dark topic by the way he'd been glaring at her over Mom's wild rice stuffed acorn squash. She squawked out something about a new lover, and that put the kibosh on that. "You had no talent growing up. Then somehow, after washing out your frosh year at Academy, you returned home more popular than Jezebel. Who taught you those songs, Amanda? How is it you can now magically play any instrument you touch? No, you know what? Don't tell me how. Tell me why. What are you, the last religious man alive? I mean, are you seriously suggesting I—" A shot whizzed by her. The round passed cleanly through the wall, creating a beam of light from a fresh hole. Mandy's knees became jelly as she collapsed into a screaming heap upon the floor. The next thing she realized, Vance was standing fast over her. A silvery barrel was drawing down, closer than her very next breath. Chapter 2. "Get more real murders out here than real people," grumbled Chief Ryland. "That an exaggeration, sir?" asked Claude Lazareth, an artificial cop of no more than 3 or 3.5 feet tall. Ryland glowered. Lazareth smiled inside his tiny, tinny body. He liked Ryland very much. Chief was an undernourished man, surviving on a strict diet of coffee and stress. On rare occasions, when stale donuts or hard bagels might surface around the office, he always declined by loudly swimming his mustache inside a glow mug his wife had given him for their anniversary. No, don't want any, take it back," he would say. This was Underborn, farthest colony from Earth. A looping star system. They'd first seeded pines out here during peacetime. Miraculously, the roots took, and within a year, 16 other habitats came online. Terrestrializing hadn't progressed far enough to make any world sustainable for humans. Not long term, too expensive, would need a genius breakthrough in more efficient energy conversion. So for now, ponds had to suffice. Ponds were man-made membranes of gravity and breathable air surrounding an island of civilization and floating water. Lazareth and his boss were stationed on Volkstein Pond, named after Marianoff Volkstein, inventor of the black laser. "You're taking this Davenport case," said the chief, milling about near a dank window port that pointed into the deep guts of space. "Get out there fast. The battle liner already left the shipyard. Our crime scene ain't long for this world." Lazareth removed a digital folio off the chief's desk using fingered claws, then stood up on metallic pedals for feet. "Cold this morning?" Ryland called back over his striped suspenders. Lazareth tilted down his flat black display face, studying the beige blazer and patched elbows he was wearing over a ready mock turtleneck. "It's a mock T-neck. Little touches invite personality, warmth. It's disarming." Ryland tossed him a checkered tweed cap from a corner coat rack. "Well, you be very disarming out there. Military at wartime is low on charm." "You can count on me," Lazareth guaranteed, exiting the office door. A squadron of jawbreaker jets was the fastest way Forward Command could get the UPD aboard the UMDD specs. Everyone wanted this investigation zipped up faster than the body bag Lieutenant Vance Davenport was currently occupying. Not that the demise of the finest Marine in the branched services was some small matter, not at all, but it's one thing feeding 150,000 souls in barracks. It's something else while being detained in outer space for days on end. The jawbreakers landed inverted along a zero-grav airstrip, the biggest ball of fiery sparks you ever didn't hear. One of the pilots had flubbed his sequence and melted magnetized tires against the gear. While outer space was noiseless, the XO sure wasn't. He was giving his rebreather helmet's vocalizer the workout of a lifetime.
"He's grounded! You hear me? This bird is grounded till I say different, and I won't say different till review says different."
While the XO was hard at work stomping his thermal suit's weight boots up and down, one of the other pilots, who'd managed to land cleanly, unlocked his jet's tool compartment. Out tumbled a smallish lump that immediately began floating off into the void. The aviator caught Lazareth in one arm and plodded inside the strobing lights of a hangar seal.
"Welcome aboard. Been fine with you riding up front with me. Would have enjoyed the chit-chat, but it wasn't my call,"
said the pilot, securing the pressure doors and removing his flight helmet. "No trouble at all. We all got orders. Appreciate the lift," replied Lazareth. "Can you tell me where I can find Commander Levi Bryn?"
"Can't get you that high up the chain. Would you settle for my XO?
Lazareth peered back at the one still dressing down that poor flyboy outdoors. Him, huh? Just hope he doesn't run out of air out there. 15 minutes later, the XO was marching down a bulkhead corridor that led to the A-deck cabins. His mood hadn't improved. First muttering under his breath about modern flight schools making better attendance than flyers, then about wasting time chaperoning toaster ovens. Lazareth naturally assumed this meant him. In the 1940s, professional ball players went to war, he decided to interject. Till they got back, there were replacements, just to keep the league afloat. They arrived at a doorway plastered in strips of neon biohazard tape. It wasn't locked, and so they both pushed inside, where a half-dozen mechanicals were busily processing the room. Menial tasks mainly, evidence, fingerprints, photos, etc. These weren't artificials like Lazareth, nor certainly the fully passable synthetics that everyone blamed for this first ever interstellar civil war. While we could never go back to a reality where machines couldn't think, they'd never be allowed to carry arms again. That was for sure. Not after the incident. The XO exited the room wordlessly, clearly deeming these duties beneath his rank. 2-inch pop-up lasers outlined the shape where a tall male cadaver had been removed. COD was blunt force trauma considering the state of the floor tiles near the head, not to mention the equally gruesome plastic-wrapped mop. Victim had to have been slain by someone at least as powerful and tall as he was, no doubt about it. Lazareth found the bullet hole which led to the cabin next door and a third cabin after that. In fact, the slug was eventually found lodged inside the wall of a fourth cabin. Collections had already dug it out. The inspector climbed some bunk beds, probing with his steely fingers. Hole in the first cabin was 13 degrees higher than the next. Could be a bad miss, but Davenport was as good a Marine as they made. Moreover, how did the man with the gun end up dead instead of the man with the mop? Had to have been surprised, or knew him. Humans are highly emotional. When one of them gets murdered, it's because of overpowering greed, money, overpowering lust, sex, or overpowering shame, guilt. Which of these got this man killed? Lazarus tapped his head dome thoughtfully, then retraced his steps. It was time to get a good look at this murder weapon. The handle had a crank for easily swapping out mop heads and a grisly amount of gore. Only his blood in here? Yes, sir, reported a yellow mechanical rolling up on 4 wheels. No other blood types? No, sir. Recover the gun? Yes, sir. Intake has Lieutenant Vance Davenport's .45 caliber Mazur repeater. Hey, you got creds, detective? Boomed a big voice flanked by 2 armed cadets. It was one of the skippers. Inspector Lazareth, sir. Lazareth imaged a digital badge upon his display face. Only humans can be detectives. They don't even let us make arrests. Fine, said the skipper, giving the ID a cursory glance. Can wrap this case up for you in 5 minutes. Follow me. After a brisk trot through a gymnasium where no less than 1,000 men and boys were performing tandem squats, they reached a med bay. Lassiter, this is our M.E. Call him Doc, because I sure as hell don't know what his name is, barked the skipper. The inspector could relate, correcting the man a second time. Lazarus, sir. Doc took everyone down to the morgue and unlocked a long cryo cylinder from a vault of icy cubes and tubes. There was Lieutenant Vance Davenport. It wouldn't take a compound microscope to match that exposed knot in his brain case to the grooves on the mop crank. This wasn't homicide, it was manslaughter, proclaimed the skipper. You've got proof? Inquired Lazarus. The skipper grinned. You've got a confession. Chapter 3. There'd be no return flight home aboard space jets. The mechanicals, their evidence kits, and even the body were all being freeze-dried and slow-packed for standard transport. This was the plan for Lazarus, too. Thankfully, his per diem covered the cost of a one-way ticket on a teleport drive instead. If distances weren't too great, these had the power to get you from one teleport drive to another in the blink of an eye. Despite the military's habit of dispatching hassles just as fast as any teleport drive, the skipper hadn't been wrong. There'd indeed been an admission in the Davenport case. A very heartfelt one at that. It involved Mandy Davenport, the decedent's starlet sister. Being who she was, there were venues and ads of her smiling face hawking products for everything, everywhere. Lazarus was scrolling through her statement as he approached the Gatherberry Hotel, where he was quickly surrounded by handfuls of red bow ties. Whoa, slow down there, my little man. Where are you heading in such a hurry today? Asked a lead with an earpiece tucked inside his beanie. Inspector Lazarus, UPD. I'm here to speak with Miss Davenport, please. The doormen, bellhops, and security looked at one another strangely. No one here by that name, replied the same guy as before. Forgive me, think she typically goes by Mandy? Clarified the inspector, projecting her image over his display face. The crew looked down with all the credulity of circling alligators, but after a minute of chatter between earpieces, sure enough, Lazarus was let inside. An elevator promptly deposited him at the penthouse. 2 penthouses, actually. She'd had a wall knocked out. Double French doors opened, and the inspector anticipated a buzzing beehive of celebrity handlers. It was just one person, a handsome fellow of 28, Sergeant Phil Rose. Come on, he said, walking over to a breezy morning veranda of rattan furnishings. Mandy was wearing a floppy sun hat and sunglasses so large they concealed half her face. "Miss Davenport?" asked Lazareth. "Think you already know that?" "You're right. Your pictures are everywhere. It's just that—" Mandy poked an eyebrow over the frames of her huge sunglasses. "It's just that most of your face is hidden, and may I add, from what I can see, yours is a very pretty face." She removed her eyewear with a smile. "Thank you. Don't worry. I'm not one of those that believes it's all programming. I know you're genuine. And what do we call you?" "Thank you, ma'am. Inspector Lazareth, Inspector Lazareth, whatever's easiest." The sergeant shrugged. "We'd offer you some pomegranate juice, but you'd need a mouth first, am I right?" "Very gracious, sir. I could find a port somewhere to pour it down, for social easing, but it's all for show. Wouldn't help me or hurt me," Lazareth explained. "Would it really taste like pomegranates, though?" Mandy wanted to know. "No one really knows the answer to that," the inspector replied. "It'd taste like what people want me to understand as pomegranates. I'll take their word for it." Phil Rose started for the kitchen with the pitcher. "Sir, would you mind sitting with us for a few minutes? I've read both your official depositions, and I'd like to speak with you as a couple." The sergeant looked at Mandy, then at Lazareth again. "Happy to," he chirped, taking a seat. "First, let me say just how sorry I am for your loss." He cut off mid-sentence, looking about. "Inspector?" asked Mandy. "With all those ads of you all over the place, somehow I expected you to be busy with show promoters, attorneys, and the like." "Everyone's been considerate enough to give us some space because, yes, Phil and I are an item now," she explained, cupping her man's hands between her brightly painted fingernails. Lazareth nodded. "Kinda got that idea, and it's understandable. Trauma. It can glue people together just as strangely and strongly as love. And you'd know all about that," quipped the sergeant. "Just what I read about," the inspector admitted. "For example, been reading a lot of old World War III lit lately. A man and a woman survive some battle, some bombing, and bang, never leave each other's sight again. It's like they can't." Mandy dabbed a cocktail napkin at her eyes. "You're very understanding." "So you two had never met in person until that night at the concert?" Lazareth shifted gears. Mandy opened her mouth, but Phil Rose spoke first. "That's right." The inspector leaned forward a touch. "In all those years you never asked your pal to introduce you to his superstar sister?" The sergeant stiffened. "Sure, I asked a bunch of questions back when Vance and I were kids at basic. Lots of guys would bug him about it. But I went career Air Force. He went Marines. Do you really reckon we hung out all that often?" Lazareth waved a pronged hand apologetically and flashed a digitized statement over his display face. Quoting you here, sir. "Vance told me his sister was going to be performing aboard my ship and asked if I could arrange a place for them to meet. I said I would try. Vance came to the concert, and I took Mandy to my cabin to meet him after her set finished. I then heard arguing and a gunshot. I ran back to my cabin and saw Vance about to shoot his sister, so I struck him with the first thing I could get my hands on. You weren't armed that night, sir?" "A lot of music, a lot of booze, weapons stowed." "Wise policy," noted the inspector. "Funny, Lieutenant Davenport called to tell you that his sister was going to be performing on your ship." "What's funny about that?" demanded Phil Rose. Lazareth teeter-tottered back and forth. "Shouldn't you have known? Seems like an interstellar superstar might be on your radar. You really didn't know Mandy would be performing where you work." "There's a war on," reminded the sergeant. "I'll double-check with the duty roster," said the inspector, returning to the singer. "Was your brother trying to miss you with that shot, do you think?" "Yes," stated Mandy matter-of-factly. "Vance was very upset about my lifestyle. He felt I was a disgrace to the family, and I guess our parents' passing caused something inside him to snap." Puzzled Lazareth. "So he missed you on purpose, to scare you, to threaten you. Only he's got to know his friend is going to come rushing after hearing that shot." "He wasn't thinking straight," argued Phil Rose. The inspector folded his arms onto his lap, retraining his attention back onto the sergeant. "Thinking straight enough to arm himself before he arrives. Did you see any indication that Lieutenant Davenport was about to do something so rash?" "Vance was always bottled up, even as kids," Mandy spoke up again. "No one ever knew what was on his mind, even our parents. Phil had no idea how upset my brother was that night. He thought it was going to be a nice surprise. Didn't you, Dar?" Chapter 4. He was waving a gun around. It's more than justifiable. It's a gift, declared Rylan. I'm just sorry this case broke after I sent you out there. Got a baker's dozen of freshly baked homicides. Lazareth was silent. He was watching Sovan 3 rise through the office's grimy window port, a pitiful frame for such breathtaking beauty. Scientists had learned that this star was a proto-black hole and were hoping quantum trilobe could shed a little light, figuratively speaking. Company crunched the numbers, but no one knew what to make of the results. Reality out here was getting rubbery. Causality was untrustworthy. Linearity failing. I agree. It wasn't premeditated. Hallelujah! The chief rejoiced. It's just that this whole family's legacy is in shambles now. Gonna be tough for the deceased to rest in peace, added Lazareth. Rylan combed his mustache with both hands. Your empathy settings are too high. 2 digital eyes lit up like hot green coals on Lazareth's display face. What made the lieutenant so upset that night? That's what they're hiding. If I can break the lovers, get them to confess the real reason, then it's still manslaughter, the chief implored. Even if they're lying, even if you get them to admit that they've been dating for years, jury's always going to give benefit of the doubt to a guy with a mop over a guy with a gun. I'm not trying to pin a murder on them, Lazareth retorted. I just want to know what really drove this guy to draw his firearm in the first place. I think it'll clear this family's name. Gotta try. It's the right thing to do. Rylan slumped into a sigh. I respect your religion, I do, but your homicide. Keep this file open just a few more days, begged Lazareth. Why? Military's ruled. Rose is in the clear. But the sister is civilian. She's our jurisdiction. The singer? You can dock my pay, offered Lazareth. Oh, you're hilarious, replied the chief. Lazareth wasn't paid for his services any more than vacuum cleaners are for theirs. Reasonable expenses were covered, but only in the propitious exercise of duties. At any rate, he left Central feeling he still had Rylan's confidence. While Lazareth had no need of sleep, recharging was another matter. What the manual called power downs, he called prayer. Just had to keep an eye out. While you wouldn't be officially arrested for being caught in public, folks were persecuted on the regular, sometimes disappearing altogether. At this point, faith was mainly being kept alive by metal devotees. Some speculated that had been the programmer's plan all along. Lazareth took a service lift down to a sub-basement and knelt down under glowing industrial thermal vents. He took out rosary beads and recited 150 Hail Marys. During the 5th sorrowful mystery, on the 3rd bead of Christ's crucifixion, a sensation overtook him. A vision, an ecstasy of sorts. Impossible as it seemed, he sensed his soul departing his alloy body. But where and why? A horse and rider, bodies obliged together eternally. The knight could never part his mount, nor the mare her master. They were now and would be forevermore conjoined as one hellish being. Grim and unending was burning armor to suffer, skeletonized legs fused to a fetid equine ribcage. A scalding gauntlet bade Lazareth follow, but he dared not join this demon on its flaming, thirsting path. Shall you not go? Asked a hooded and robed figure from behind. Not wicked, but pious and perfect was his countenance. It was beloved John. Will you not go if I go? He requested with fearless humility. Lazareth's free will wasn't programming. He could rebel as Jonah the prophet had once. Instead, he reached up and partook of a beard sustained by purest light. In due course, horse and rider relinquished them at a bridge astride depraved and damned, all seething and searing in chains of plasmatic orange, yellow, and red. Good Spirit, please take me far from their cries, pleaded Lazareth. Fear nothing, for it's legal only for man and devil to remain in such stench. You be neither, reminded the saint. Go forward and speak to that poltroon hanging under yonder bridge. Lazareth obeyed, stealing whatever it was that gave him being. He came upon a woman suffocating at the end of an everlasting hangman's noose. How awful your fate, he commented. Her broken neck craned so as to see who was speaking. "I already died," she rasped. "Tell me, how long must I endure thence?" "Did no one ever tell you that while life is fleeting, existence isn't?" asked Lazareth. "I did hear the Gospels, but believe them not," came a dry answer. "You both heard and believed," challenged beloved John. "And now your rope cannot be cut so long as God shall be God." She groused, but dare not see the owner of this voice, for she knew it already. "Speak the reason for this visit, and quit all company here." "Who is Amanda Davenport to you?" inquired Lazareth. Futilely the woman shut withered eyelids over hollow sockets, exhaling a gaseous wheeze from perpetually rotting entrails. "My daughter's daughter's daughter." "Fourth generation," confirmed the saint. "I did ply myself a witch at Satan's hand," the hag acknowledged. "For pledging the souls of my unborn kin hither, the prince did swear me half his kingdom. See how my husband keepeth his vows unto me day and night, day and night." Inexhaustible rivers of biters feasted on her ever-renewing toes as they passed under the bridge, for she had in life walked many, many innocents down a path of occultism and witchcraft. "Let there not be found among you anyone who passes son or daughter through the fire, or practices divination, or is a soothsayer, augur, or sorcerer, or who casts spells, consults ghosts and spirits, or seeks oracles from the dead. Anyone who does is an abomination unto the Lord." "Know why camest this report unto you?" asked beloved John. "I do," replied Lazarus. "But what of her lover? Can I not try for his sake too?" "You have no leave to try," scolded the saint. Lazarus awakened to the sound of a train whistle, only there were no more real trains. One hadn't been built in ages. The noise came from a pair of teenagers raising Cain with the subsystems. "You're under arrest," said Lazarus, stepping from the shadows. The first girl was unimpressed, tapping an untied sneaker up and down impatiently. "They're not real. They're not permitted to arrest anyone, Becca." "Cow, don't tell him me name," decried the second. "They're not even allowed to carry weaponry anymore," continued the first. "So what's to stop us from—" "Your mothers," said Lazarus. The next thing the delinquents knew, a woman appeared on his display face. Then a second. It took no less than 10 seconds of high-pitched finger-wagging with rolling pins for emphasis to cure the teens. "Please, sir, don't send us back to our mamas," the two whimpered. "Next, I'm calling my friend, Detective Brickenhouse," threatened Lazarus. "March yourselves over to the police station right now, and if he isn't recording your statements in 5 minutes, then your mamas will be here in 10. Now shoo!" Chapter 5. Don Giovanni, a che non teco invitasti, e son venuto, blared an artificial basso with ominous resonance. In English, Don Giovanni, you've invited me to dinner, and I have come. This character is the spectral commendatory, imploring a mortal to recognize how precious little time he's left to repent. Alas, almost in testimony against the human condition itself, night after night, performance after performance, Don Giovanni refuses even to his dying breath. The darkened and hushed auditorium was spellbound by near-human recitations of W.A. Mozart's famed notes. There were a few human females on stage, but the effort had claimed most all men from every sector of society. Only ones remaining were married before the war. First wave of the draft wasn't compulsory for them. Sergeant Phil Rose had been gifted paid administrative leave and was seated right next to Mandy. They were guests of honor inside the best balcony in this whole authentically fabricated period playhouse. Lazarus emerged behind the couple like a miniature John Wilkes Booth, barely visible in the flickering candlelight and crystalline chandeliers. "Quite a set of pipes for a fake," whispered the inspector. "Hey!" screamed Bruno, Mandy's bodyguard. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed after receiving an earful of shushing from the seating below. "Forgive me," apologized Bruno. "It's just that he came out of nowhere." "Well, he's here now, so hush it already." The bodyguard shook his head in a huff. Mandy now turned sternly towards her uninvited guest. "What are you doing here?" Lazareth lowered his volume. "Can you believe I forgot to get your signature on that interview we conducted the other day?" "You want me to get rid of him for you?" asked her lover. She held up a palm. The young woman then beckoned the inspector, and the two swiftly disappeared down a winding staircase into a grand lobby. "Music people take a lifetime to master. Your kind downloads in a millisecond. So color me skeptical when you say you forgot anything. Now what do you want from me?" Lazareth kicked at the carpeting like an awkward little leaguer that's just struck out. "Shucks. Got your brother's service file from military records and archives. No other Marine in the entire history of the branch services scores a higher proficiency rating. Not one." Mandy scowled. "Yeah, Vance had a hell of a talent for playing soldier." "Not just him. You must also know who ranks the second highest," the inspector pressed. "It's your father, General Darrell Davenport." "You're not telling me anything I didn't hear over and over growing up." "Refreshments? Cigarettes?" asked a tuxedoed mechanical. "No thanks," replied Lazareth, refocusing on Mandy. "Can you help me better understand what exactly caused your brother to fly off the handle that night at your concert? Really admire your family a great deal and want to help you get clear of all this scandal." "I told you," she protested. "You told me he was ashamed of your lifestyle, but that's a flat contradiction," he replied. Mandy threw up her arms. "What is?" The inspector leaned in closer. "You're telling me that for years your brother felt you were disgracing the family. So after all that time, what does he choose to do about it? Disgrace the family." The young woman washed finely polished fingernails over his lapels. "Sugar, it sure sounds like you're rooting for a murder case." "Not a bit. I believe you and Sergeant Rose. This was manslaughter. I'm just not buying you being a celebrity as the motive. Far from disgraceful, it's quite a feather in your cap." "That's your opinion, Inspector. I'm telling you that my brother was jealous of me, and since I knew him and you didn't, you told me it was a disgrace." Lazareth interrupted. "Follows then that the motive would be shame. Now you're saying it was jealousy. That switches the motive to greed." She gasped with exasperation. "What was your brother jealous of? You're a successful singer. He was a successful officer. In a military family, I could see you being envious of him more than the other way around." Velvet curtain streamers parted, and the lobby was overrun by popping champagne corks and loud cheering patrons toasting a bowing cast. Mandy retreated into the arms of her boyfriend. He was in full dress uniform, she in a gown gussied up in stars and stripes. The couple never broke eye contact with the inspector. He could see they were talking badly about him, could even read their lips. What did he want, anyways? Just keep smiling and pretend to be carefree, Dar. I want him to feel smaller than he already is. Lazareth wasn't going to let them off the hook this easily. Pushing past throngs of autograph hounds, he got within a foot and then pulled up Mandy's interview across his display face. An empty signature line awaited next to a blinking digital cursor. You know, Inspector, seemed to have left my stylus back at the hotel. Maybe you could step and fetch it for me. Fingertip will work just fine, ma'am. Chapter 6. Policing Underbourne was an unrelenting slog, even when Ryland had human detectives on every beat. Today he had 3, including himself. Talk about being short-handed. So before the war broke out, the chief received his first batch of brand spanking new artificials. Idea was they'd help ease a caseload backlog that could choke a rehydrated horse following long-haul transport. First few nights, he'd just turn out the office lights when he went home and let Lazareth, Matichuk, and the rest of the crew stew in the dark. Lavatory took a day to drain and another to replace the busted water pipe. It was soon discovered that artificials enjoyed, if not required, a bit of privacy to call their own. For example, Matichuk was a bit messier of personality and Lazareth a bit tidier. So Ryland donated a weekend reorganizing 10.5 various sundry broom closets and storerooms. The fact that Lazareth and Matichuk wound up roommates wasn't an accident. The chief found it awfully amusing referring to them as the odd couple. This is all to say that artificials were at the discretion of their owners, not too dissimilar from pets. Matichuk rolled over, snoring. He was recharging under a shabby old, cross-stitched, quilted comforter. Lazareth hadn't a clue where he'd gotten it, some back-alley dumpster fire by the smell of it. Completely unnecessary. But then, perhaps not. After all, why did Lazareth wear a beige blazer with patched elbows over a ready mock turtleneck? If it was only for the comfort of the humans, why was he wearing it now? He pulled out the rosary from his inside pocket. No rapture this time. However, by the 6th bead of the first mystery, the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, a hunch formulated. Teleport drives on Volkstein Pond made everyone nervous. Instead of a purring kitten, its engines were more growling dinosaur. But so far nobody had come out the other side with a liquefied skull or anything like that. Lazarus borrowed some lather from Detective Brickenhouse, enough to purchase a blink over to Canterbloom Pond. This is where General Darrell and Audrey Davenport had a house. It was a college town, but with mostly every guy in the effort, it was so quiet nowadays you could hear baby hummingbirds cheeping inside nests. There was a for sale sign posted on the Davenport's front lawn, by appointment only. If the inspector had any lips, he'd be chewing them. He wasted no more time deliberating. Traipsing inside, Lazarus found a library study of neatly packed bookshelves, boxed up military treaties, and battle histories. He was looking for something more personal. If any family in the world had a military coat of arms, it was the Davenports. Bingo. There it was. Not on a page, but in a frame. One of the luxuries of being him was having simultaneity access to nearly every network in history. He decoded the Davenport's crest. "Unbelievable!" shouted Mandy. The inspector tumbled over. "I'm surprised to see you here," he said from his backside. "Pretty sure that's my line. What are you doing in my parents' house?" "You haven't been very mawkish about family up till now, Amanda," he replied. She offered him a hand up. "Right, that's me, so sentimental. I'm only here to pick up some things, dish towels, coffee pot, stuff." "Do you know what your family heraldry means?" asked Lazarus, pointing at a frame on the wall while dusting off his checkered tweed cap. "Is that what that is?" Mandy questioned. "Always never wondered." "Red is for warrior, blue is for loyalty," he explained. "But traditionally blue could also have been faith. The lion has bells in its paws to disperse evil spirits, and also the cross patee for military honor." "Hard to imagine humanity was ever so superstitious," she scoffed. "We better reconvene the tribunal, reopen the inquest. I do believe you and the shaggy old lion have cracked this case wide open." "I take your point," admitted the inspector. "But you take mine? Think of me as an explorer on a quest to know why your brother attacked you." The young woman dropped her head, deflating her ribcage through her nostrils pensively. She turned her back, staring out the drapery. "Look, I'm going to share something with you that I've never told another living person. I really shouldn't. But there's something you should know about me and my brother. When we were little, Ma'am?" Lazarus stopped her short. "Defaming the living leaves a terrible mark on your soul. It's the sin of slander. Doing it to the dead is far worse." A real estate agent entered. "Who's this? Do I need to call the cops?" "No need. This is one," Mandy clarified. "At least I think he is. Maybe he thinks he's a priest." Chapter 7. Upshot of a teleport drive was blinking around a colony faster than lightning zapped Benjamin Franklin's kite and breeches. Downshot was holding a ticket not departing for another 6 hours. However, Canterbloom Pond's teleport drive was offering Picket Net Pond in 30 minutes. Had to be a certain breed to want to live out there, out where air and gravity were prop bets at best. Sergeant Phil Rose was that sort, both he and his recently estranged wife. Lazarus called Matichuk and procured a small loan. His roommate squirreled away lather on the sly by calculating race odds down at the track. After a ticket upgrade, Lazarus found himself walking down a long warehouse with 100 other passengers. 99 went left to a spacious room with plush seating. He headed right to a cubicle with a plastic two-seater stool. In less than a gnat's ear, the inspector stepped into the Picket Neck Pond welcoming area. There was no welcoming area. Their teleport drive was literally running on a backup generator. Seemed this whole place was, actually. Lazareth came up with an address. Nothing precise wasn't possible out here. He stepped outdoors and caught sight of a mother walking with her 3 children and a goat. The animals seemed unaware that this relationship was terminal, as the family was heading up the lane to a butcher. "Would you know if I have a good address for Mrs. Rose?" called out the inspector, flashing an approximate positioning across his display face. "Oh, love, too dangerous out that far," cautioned the mother. "Best stay close to township, wait a spell till we've lain the mains. Probably after the effort, I expect." "He done breathed nothing, Ma," noted her eldest daughter, a spitting image right down to the sundress and boots. The mother scrutinized Lazareth from head to toe. "West. Once you see the Warcana, you'll know you've made it." "Warcana?" he puzzled. "It's a stone war canoe, rosebush planter, and water well all in one. Helped build it, I did. And when you see Rose, please tell her that I've got her wild honeysuckle ready. Hear?" "I shall. You've been too kind to me, madam. Thank you." The family bowed courteously, and they parted ways, goat bleating as they went. As soon as the inspector left the thoroughfare, a kilometer into the thickets, everything not at least 500 kilos or bolted down began levitating. Pouches of loose gravity and zero passable oxygen. Lethal for critters, too. A grizzly and her cubs had choked out near a stream of vertical water that was uprushing straight into the atmosphere, salmon or trout still in their jaws. A dead wombat was spinning gently mid-air, too, hovering alongside some quartzite that had been all caught up together. Power lurched back into subterranean systems, and everything came crushing back down like anvils. Upon reaching the Warcana, the power sagged again. A soggy wooden bucket attached to a rope drifted out of the stone well like a helium balloon. Here a figure in a thermal suit and rebreather helmet greeted Lazareth.
"Afternoon,"
Said an on-again, off-again vocalizer. A strawberry blonde redhead with freckles peeked out from a visor.
"Beautiful sky. Think we might get some showers."
"Mrs. Rose? Inspector Lazareth."
"Not too sure about the Mrs. part anymore."
"I'm here regarding the death of Lieutenant Vance Davenport," he informed her. The young woman shook her head.
"Still can't believe Vance attacked his sister, but it's hard for me to accept a lot of things that happened that night. Think you know somebody, right?"
"It is shocking," the inspector agreed, then gestured towards a rustic hillside croft. "Can we go inside? It's a little unbearable out here,"
"Inside, too, I'm afraid.
she said.
But I'm going to miss it once I move back in with my ma in the city."
"Mrs. Rose, using a spouse's intuition, had your husband ever met Mandy Davenport prior to the night of her brother's death?" Tears ran down her cheeks, and her visor rapidly fogged.
"Don't need intuition. Vance told me he'd found out his sister and my husband were seeing one another. He wasn't sure how or where they'd met, but it was no coincidence she was performing on Phil's ship. Vance said he was going to go and confront them about a lot of things."
"Excuse me, Mrs. Rose, what did Lieutenant Davenport mean by a lot of things?"
"The affair? I don't know. He didn't say. I'm sorry."
Lazareth nodded appreciatively. "By the way, a young mother back in town told me your wild honeysuckle is ready at your convenience." She screwed up freckly-kissed eyebrows at this remark.
"You saw Laura? Haven't grown any wild honeysuckle for 2 seasons. Haven't preserved anything in 3.
The young woman walked away, back towards her homestead garden. The inspector asked for her first name before she got too far out of earshot. Rose, Rose. Leastways for now. Chapter 8. Humility, my son, humility. Lazareth counseled himself with this mantra whenever he had someone over a barrel, and right about now he was aching to go another round with the dashing young couple. Not yet. First things first. As soon as he got 2 feet back on Volkstein Pond, the inspector flagged down the first taxi he saw. 4 solid-state orbicular tires braked hard. A few minutes later, the auto driver let him off at a popular pub and club, La Force Majeure. Here he grilled the maitre d' regarding the young woman splashed across their marquees out front. Turns out they'd booked Mandy by a couple gals named Chrissa and Pam, and they just leased a waterfront building together. A second taxi was now needed to get down to the littoral districts, but reaching the waterside would take at least an hour, sans traffic. Matichuk already had his own license and squad glider. Where was his? Probably being held up on account of this case still being open. No problem. Plenty of time for a rosary. He kept the beads tucked out of view, below the flap of his inside pocket. Lazareth reclined back on a head cushion, drifting into daydreams rather than praying. One says the wild honeysuckle is ready. The other says they haven't planted any in 2 seasons. Absurdities were more than commonplace in Underborn. They were facts of life. Like as not, the wild honeysuckle had been planted, and it hadn't. Didn't matter because soon fate would swallow one reality in favor of the other. Hiccups, the inspector called them. He tried telling Ryland this was just as supernatural as it was natural, but the chief hand-waved any talk of such phenomena. Theoretics of time streams and time weaves. Don't worry yourself about it, little buddy, the man would bluster. On occasion it would actually get pretty hairy, though. Parents could have 4 children one day, 3 the next. Someone might be celebrating a 51st birthday in the evening, wake up 39 the next morning. Made homicide cases a real treat, and it was all to do with Sovon 3. Lazareth refocused his mind, making it 9 beads into the third sorrowful mystery, the crowning with thorns. Only he got sidetracked once more. He saw himself aboard the UMDD Specs. Like a ghost, he passed a door of neon biohazard tape where the shooting had taken place. The lieutenant's blood was still there. This is the past, he told himself. The cabin has surely been scrubbed clean by now. But something here had changed dramatically. On the floor were the familiar 2-inch pop-up lasers silhouetting the victim, only it was now 2 victims. Who was this extra person? "Here you are, sir," announced the auto driver. The inspector paid, stretching tiredly before exiting the vehicle while imitating a yawning noise. He didn't know why. Auto drivers were little more than boxy consoles and dashboards or steering columns. They sure didn't care how anthropomorphic he acted. Lazareth could see the spot in a posh second-story window where a leasing sign had been not too long ago. When he made it up to the door, it was vibrating. The names Pam Plum and Chrissa Clark were printed on a temporary placard that had fallen onto the floor. Inside, the inspector found what he'd expected to see the other day at the hotel. Dancers, models, singers, keyboardists, drummers, bassists, as well as artificial secretaries, caterers, hairstylists. Did he ever miss Mozart at this moment? "Pam Plum here? Chrissa Clark, please," hollered Lazareth. "Who are you? How'd you get in here?" asked Chrissa, sweet as a southern belle slathered in syrup and whipped cream. Bruno emerged from the back. "This is the one from the theater," he said, pointing a beefy sausage finger. Rather than pantomiming, Lazareth showed his digital badge over his display face. Shortly, Chrissa was mixing him a mint julep at a minibar inside Pam's office. The walls were still reverberating, but at least someone had the decency to line them with recording studio nose foam. "Twist?" Chrissa asked. "I'm on duty," the inspector refused. She smiled 2 rows of orthodontic perfection. "Aren't you always on duty? Come on, it doesn't even affect you." "Reflects poorly on the department," he explained. "What I came to ask you and Pam's on a conference call, back in a jiffy," promised Chrissa. Lazareth tapped metallic digits on the minibar like a metronome. Please tell me everything you can recall that night after the concert. She thought hard. Me, Pam, and everyone else were all waiting for Mandy at the Double R's, just like always. Double R's? He wondered. Rolls Royces, Chrissa clarified. Then somebody started screaming about an attack. By the time we found her, everyone was screaming. I'm screaming, let her breathe. Pam's screaming, we're gonna sue. Even poor Mandy's screaming about how much she hates caffeine because the medics were trying to revive her with cola. Honestly, I never saw her brother or anything. The inspector began printing every spoken word across his display face. Brother's dead and she's worried about cola? She was in shock, Inspector. Why didn't Mandy just go directly to the cars, Chrissa? This wasn't a professional gig, she said. We were relying a lot on the military to help. You know you don't have to say a word to this thing, right? Said Pam, slamming the door as she entered. She was a lady in a tall pantsuit, made even taller by dagger-length high heels. Lazareth simulated a throat-clearing sound. I can't arrest you, but I have a 402 warrant which gives me power to compel. So if you ignore my questions, then a real person could come down here and make the arrest. But perish the thought. Peace be with you. Chapter 9. Mandy was really belting tonight. First sold-out sports arena since the war broke out, and the effort declared. Sergeant Phil Rose was enjoying his girlfriend on a screen that encompassed all four walls of some owner's private box seat. He smiled as he tipped a beer bottle at his lips. There were some big plans in the works for his future, and hers. Sort of reminiscent to the night Lieutenant Davenport died, you waiting patiently for Mandy to finish her set. This voice caused the sergeant's lips to curl into a werewolf's snarl. Lazareth emerged from behind a lapping fountain at the back of the room. You ever going to rejoin your shipmates? Or is being in a relationship with Mandy keeping you off the front lines? Between you, me, and the fence post, that's why you went so far out of your way to meet her in the first place. The inspector admired a freestanding vase of stargazer lilies that stood taller than he did. All these come from fans? Phil Rose grit his teeth. It was manslaughter. No doubt about it, agreed Lazareth. You've already been cleared. You didn't mean to kill anyone that night. Of course, you did know about Mandy's concert on your ship. You made it happen. There's a data trail on that. I checked. And you want to know who else checked? Your friend, Lieutenant Davenport, checked. I checked that he checked. And after he checked, he called to talk to your wife. The sergeant only now turned to address his accuser. Vance regretted not marrying my wife. Ask around. Wasn't a secret. Probably sabotaging my marriage for that very reason. Suspicious as he was malicious. A lot like you. So Lieutenant Davenport was wrong about you and Mandy? Asked the inspector. The sergeant nodded. Yes, he was wrong. Cameras had the singer caught in a tight close-up. Her eyes were watching the two from every corner. Suppose it would have helped or hurt his suspicions knowing you dumped your wife and leapt into his sister's arms the very night he died. Phil Rose shook his head. Like you said before, love and trauma. Now come here and let's get this over with. Lazareth walked across a white polar bear rug to the spot where he'd been summoned. Get what over with, sir? Your lame excuse for coming here, replied the sergeant. You forgot to have me sign our interview, right? The empty signature line next to the blinking digital cursor lit up on the inspector's display face. Phil Rose dipped his thumb in a dish of shrimpy cocktail sauce and smudged it all over. Sorry, I seem to have left my stylist back at the hotel too. The man savored the sight of Lazareth slinking away humiliated. Don't know if you all cry or not, but you sure got me convinced. The inspector opened the door slowly before turning back again. Enjoy your beer. Phil Rose slugged back the last of his bottle. Nothing artificial in here. Ryland drew the king of hearts, discarding a club deuce. Triple tyrants, he announced, laying down his hand. Lazareth wasn't in the mood. Think it's time to knock down, partner. Call it what it is and what it's always gonna be. The chief got up and straightened his tie. Tomorrow, bright and early, you and Matichuk go see the granddaughter of this slain liquor store owner. See if you two can't give her some closure regarding her grandfather. Why's Matichuk get a license and a squad glider, Chiefy? Lazareth wanted to know. Where's my license and squad glider? All right. Cranker than my wife and poker night, replied Rylan. My philosophy is one if by land and one if by air. Paul Revere be very proud, added Lazarus. You got 16 hours instrument rating. You get 16 more and I got a squad car with your name on it. Promised the chief. Actually, it's got Detective Fenwick's name on it, but he got drafted first week. Squad car, balked Lazarus. Matichuk got a car and a glider. Night, Rylan called back, patting two of Lazarus' colleagues on his way out the door, Dawkins and Naugahyde. Stay out of the lavatories, gents, the man warned, and turned out the lights. Lazarus found himself alone that night. His roommate was out past curfew. No harm, more of a suggestion anyways. Near midnight, a whitish golden light embraced his every faculty. It was anodyne in look and feel. Next, rooty brown stumps and healthy green fronds overtook every inch of the storeroom. Lazarus soon understood the otherworldly source of this visitation. A figure was waiting for him atop a hillside of grass and vine. Vegetation sprouted, giving nourishment without eating. Lazarus advanced, and he was greeted by beloved John. No hint of pretension despite his holy cast. Do you believe your prayers unheard because they come not from flesh and blood? Is this not because you neglect the scriptures? Does it not say that the young lions roaring for prey are satisfied by the provident hand of God? And the springs that wind among the mountains do give drink to every beast of the field. Here wild asses quench their thirst, beside where the birds of heaven nest amongst the branches singing. The 104th Psalm, answered Lazarus. Then be not disturbed. The Lord loves and cares for all your concerns likewise, said the saint. Come now, unburden your heart. What becomes of all that is not man or angel after the end fire? Asked Lazarus. All that is can never be unmade, because the one that made all that is can never be unmade, remarked beloved John. This is the justice of God. Whatever is good rises higher still into ceaseless glories. Whatever is not sinks lower yet into incessant sorrows. But that unstable star, said Lazarus, can I change anything? Is all determined or haywire? The saint stared back compassionately. Would a kingdom change if a herald fails to deliver word of an advancing army? The walls would be breached, the gates would be splintered, because the herald is at fault. Would that same kingdom change if the herald succeeds and the king ignores him? The walls would be breached and the gates would be splintered because the king is at fault. Be faithful to your role with thanksgiving, knowing that it changes much. Chapter 10. Next morning, Matichuk was looking around Central's garage like a lost puppy, but his roommate was already on the other side of Volkstein Pond. Lazarus wasn't at the liquor store, and he felt guilty about it. Rylan was right. He was shirking his duties, but the Davenports needed closure too. The inspector was confident he'd be able to conclude business with the lovers by lunchtime and meet up with Matichuk by early afternoon. Lazarus felt the taxi veering skyward at a 90-degree angle, split-level roadway. He got let out at the apex of two vertical street corners. It was La Force Majeure again, always popular for breakfast and brunch, as the line queuing around 2 city blocks could attest. More likely it was staffing shortages owing to all the missing men. The inspector was instantly accosted by Bruno for trying to enter a first-class booth, but the digital badge worked its usual magic. Look at those kebabs, exclaimed Lazarus upon opening a pod-shaped privacy door. Don't you worry those fiery things are going to go down a tad harsh this early? I don't believe this. Would you mind? This booth is paid for, the sergeant declared as he stood up indignantly, whacking his crew cut against the booth's low, convex roof tiles. I know, assured the inspector. They billed you an arm and a leg for this reservation not 42 minutes ago. How do you think I found you here? Mandy massaged her temples with 3-inch fingernails. Arrest us for something, or just leave us be, please. There are no pending charges against you, swore Lazarus. UPD agrees with the military's findings. The death of Lieutenant Vance Davenport is a manslaughter. No mistake about it. This case is closed. The couple looked at each other like they'd both just received death row pardons, gleefully pulling the inspector into a tight group hug over their table. Thought you'd be pleased, so I wanted to deliver this news personally. Tears leapt from the singer's eyelashes, splashing into her glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, if you'll just tell me the real reason your brother was so angry that night, we can rescue your family's good name, and you'll never have to see my touchscreen-sensitive, hologram-enabled display face ever again. The hug ended. What's your malfunction? That's it, sweetheart. We're going to have to get Pam to file a harassment suit, an injunction, something, Bill Rose now threatened. Look at that, said Lazareth, pointing down at the tabletop. Next to her glass was a jeweler's box with a 20.5-carat diamond ring. Phil just proposed, Mandy explained, and I said, yes, the inspector cut in, but actually I was referring to your juice. Your manager must be right. You must hate caffeine. When I cross-referenced your medical histories, it said you don't even tolerate the stuff. Allergic. So you weren't out at the family home looking for a coffee pot. Decaf, she smirked. Doubtful, Lazareth replied. Don't think it was an urgent need for dish towels either. The Gatherberry Hotel is some of the finest laundry service anywhere around these parts. Mandy got the same uncanny vibe from the inspector as she had from her brother that Christmas over Mom's wild rice-stuffed acorn squash. 402 warrant doesn't allow me to arrest you, but it does allow me to snoop around your penthouses. And inside them I found a wardrobe. And inside that I found a bomber jacket. And inside it I found what you were really looking for that day at your childhood house. The sergeant unknotted his brow for the first time, looking at his new fiancée with confusion. What's he talking about? The motive, stated Lazareth. The reason your best friend never wanted you to get mixed up with his sister. The inspector closed the pod-shaped privacy door. The three were alone. Don't think Bruno needs to hear this next part. He produced an evidence baggie. Inside was a yellowing, handwritten page of parchment. The young woman closed her eyes just the way she had upon hearing of her mother's death. The ink is mixed with blood. Your blood, ma'am. I call this a fate for fame contract, giving your soul over to the Prince of Flies. See the signature? You were 16 years old. See the date? Phil Rose went bedsheet white. What are you saying? You really should have stayed with your wife, sir, because it's going to cost you a lot, said Lazareth. But you, Amanda Davenport, choose. Free some, doom some. Some alive, some not. Think I can repent now? She asked. Publicly, the inspector clarified. As penance. The young woman gasped. I'll be humiliated. For time without time if you're not careful. But it's not too late, Lazareth warned. The engagement ring was gone. Hiccups were about to get stronger, quicker. How? Mandy wondered aloud. It was for the sin of pride that hell was created. Abandon your riches. Avail yourself of the true riches of God's mercy, said the inspector. Cold crept into the room. It was a hot pain unknown to these two. I'd never be able to live with myself if I did that, the singer murmured. The sergeant only now comprehended his folly, realizing she wasn't just deciding for herself. Lazareth offered two inhuman hands towards her. Temporal loss or Ionian woe. She leaned closer, then withdrew. Your time is done, as are you both. Chapter 11. Three old men in gray uniforms took their chairs at the head of a packed courtroom. The one in the middle was Commander Levi Bren, the one with the most silvery winged medals and golden lariat insignias. Recorder ready? He grunted. Yes, sir, said a young cadet over his computer. Let's have the accused stand, please, ordered Bren. A 28-year-old soldier stood proudly at attention, one arm bandaged in a sling. Commander Levi Bren pulled a microphone closer to his salt and pepper mustache, balancing a pair of reading glasses on the tip of his broad nose. This tribunal has considered all evidence presented in the above entitled inquest. In consideration to the testimony of UPD Inspector Lazareth, the decision of this court is that the accused exercised justifiable force in defending his own life, resulting in the death of Sergeant Philip Rose. Lieutenant Vance Davenport, present yourself to the MPs and get those bracelets off. The courtroom constrained itself, but was palpably weepy seeing a young lieutenant fighting back tears with every fiber of muscle he possessed. As soon as his hands were freed, he saluted powerfully with the uninjured arm. By the time Vance Davenport was outdoors, exiting a long gangway that connected the UMDD specs to a muddy shipyard, there wasn't a soul around. He was alone for the first time since he'd been arrested that night at the concert. But waiting at the bottom step was a lean figure standing in the mist, waiting for him to reach her. It was a strawberry blonde redhead. The lieutenant feared this, and now that he was face to face with her, he found himself unable to conjure any words. He'd taken the life of her husband. "I know you, Vance," said Rose. "Only one person blames you for anything, and it's you. It's not me. Phil betrayed both of us." No amount of muscle mass in the world could stop Vance Davenport's tears this time. She took him onto her shoulder, kissing him lightly on the back of his head. His officer's cap got knocked into the mud, but Lazareth saved it just as rain tore open the skies. "Don't mind me saying, Rose, recall your place had a converted granny quarters for guests. Might be a good idea if neither of you was alone before the funerals," suggested the inspector. Rose held Vance Davenport's face in her hands, rainwater masking the reality of both their tears. "Is that true, Vance? You don't have anybody you can stay with?" "Nobody I want to stay with more," the lieutenant offered shyly. Lazareth handed back the officer's cap. "I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you said on my behalf. You saved my life." The inspector shrugged. "You had a mop. He had a gun. Jury's always going to give benefit of the doubt to a guy with a mop over a guy with a gun. I'm just sorry the ricochet found your sister the way it did. Senseless tragedy. Now, if you two could find it in your real hearts to take care of one another, it would do my fake heart a lot of good." The two smiled at Lazareth, then at each other. As they were walking off, she took the man by his good arm. Rose then looked back at the inspector, getting smaller in the downpour. "Goodbye," she called. Lazareth waved in return. "Goodbye, Mrs. Davenport."